Good afternoon, Seoul, and good morning, Europe, and welcome to this third Strategic Talks. My name is Mats Engman, and I'm the head of the Korea Center here at ISDP. The Strategic Talk series is an effort from our side to promote dialogue and exchange of views related to the development on the Korean Peninsula and in the region. The overall aim of this new initiative is to increase the understanding of the many factors and policies that impact security development, and we intend to do this by inviting prominent scholars and experts from different backgrounds and nations to a friendly conversation during 1 hour. We will strive to have a series of conversations within a rather short time span, covering the same issues but from different perspectives. This would, we hope, enable us to identify possible differences in understanding, assessments, and policies. These strategic talks will be public and recorded, but normally not including a Q&A part. But please feel free to make comments about the talk using the chat or the commentary function on the screen. And occasionally we would also summarize a strategic talk series into a publication. In this first strategic talks, we have a security focus, and we are conducting 3 sessions during the month of June. Today's event is the third and last in this first series of talks. But over to today's talk, and I'm very excited and happy for this third talk to have 2 true South Korean experts joining me, Lieutenant General Chun In-bum and Dr. Lee Sang-yoon. Both of you are most welcome, as are of course our viewers joining us here today. Before we start, I'd like to make a short introduction of our 2 guests this morning or afternoon. Starting with Lieutenant General Chun In-bum. He has an impressive military record and has held numerous command positions as battalion, regimental, and division commander, as well as several key staff appointments, one being Director of OPCOM Transition Group at the J5 at the ROK Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he has served as the Director of U.S. Affairs at the Korean Ministry of National Defense. Internationally, General Chun has served with the multinational force in Iraq and been deployed to Afghanistan. In 2013, he became the Deputy Chief of Staff for Combined Forces Command and the senior member of the United Nations Military Armistice Commission. Later that year, he was promoted to Lieutenant General and was assigned as the commander of the ROK Special Warfare Command. His last active military assignment was as the deputy commander for the ROK First Army, and he retired from active duty in 2016. Currently, he serves as the Vice President of the Korea chapter of the Association of the United States Army, and is an advisory member of the National Policy Planning Committee and a board member of the Korean Animal Welfare Association. He's also a distinguished military fellow at ISDP here in Stockholm. Dr. Lee Sang-yoon is a senior researcher fellow at the Seong Institute in Korea. He also served as president of the Korea Nuclear Policy Society. He has an extensive career, and among his many assignments are research fellow at the Korea Institute for Defense Analysis, policy advisor for the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of National Unification, and Minister of National Defense. He has served as Director General for Policy Planning at the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He is a member of the Asia-Pacific Leadership Network for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament and the Korea-US Nuclear Policy Leadership Initiative. He has been a visiting scholar at the ISDP and at the Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. Among his many publications are, as an example, Prospect for the Biden administration's foreign policy, South Korea's foreign policy in the era of US-China strategic competition, and Trump administration's nuclear policy, implications for global nuclear energy and North Korea nuclear issues. He has a PhD from the Department of Political Science at the University of Illinois. all in all, I think you can agree with me that we have two very experienced and well-qualified guests with us today. I have asked our two guests to give a short introduction to get our conversations going, and I give the floor to General Chun. Over to you, Imbom.
Thank you, Mats. It's great to be back. The Korean Peninsula is, as usual, in a bit of a tension state right now, more so than normally because of recent developments. So it's the usual missile launches and developments by North Korea. But what caused the recent heightening of tensions is the balloons that the North Korean defectors who live in South Korea have sent up to North Korea. And I personally support these activities because these activities is to spread the idea of freedom and democracy into North Korea. But it is at a price. The North Koreans are very skittish about these activities. And in response to these activities, the North Koreans sent down more than 1,000 balloons in 2-3 occasions. And in the style of the North Koreans, they opted to put in garbage, rubbish, and in sometimes human excrement, very childish in my view. In response, the South Korean government used harsh language, just like the North Koreans, which I think was a childish act, and then moved to continue with loudspeaker broadcasts along the DMZ, which the North Koreans have numerously stated that they would consider an act of war. To this counteraction by the South Korean government, I fully understand and the value of the broadcasts, but it is a very strong measure, and I would have left that as the last resort and not my first option. But anyway, we now await North Korea's response. Just by coincidence or by design, North Korea is now sending thousands of troops along the DMZ in an effort to fortify the northern area. They're being observed to exchange and replace barbed wire, placing new landmines, and in placing barriers. It seems to me that the North Koreans are doing this to make sure that it's difficult for North Koreans to defect to South Korea along the DMZ. But whatever the reason for doing this, it does heighten tensions. It's never a good thing to see thousands of North Korean soldiers, whether they're armed with AK rifles or shovels, along the DMZ. And this will probably go on for many months. You know, there's a lot of soldiers there who do have weapons, and it's ripe for misunderstanding and miscalculation. Finally, we now have Mr. Putin in North Korea, and unfortunately, the North and the Russians have now seemed to have signed a new understanding and agreement to help each other in case of a contingency. We don't know what the scale of that help and assistance is, but as a person who is interested in security, I must conclude that the Russians intend on supporting whatever is needed, maybe to the degree of the Korean War, where Soviet pilots piloted Soviet aircraft. So it's more bad news. And if we just don't think of that degree, it means more technology transfers, more students to and from North Korea and Russia, and probably the occasional flights from the Russian Air Force, the PLA Air Force, might involve North Korean assistance in doing so. I'm sure they've already had that kind of assistance, but it could grow. And if the North Koreans were to be supplied or given aircraft that had the range, they'd probably join in and do a lot of coordination, which is also, again, bad news with North Korean ships participating, probably submarines participating in the naval exercise in the East Coast. So there's a lot of things going on, which makes stability on the Korean Peninsula more challenging. But I just want to remind everyone that these recent events is not just my problem, it's a world problem. And I'm happy to see all of you here to talk about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Inbom, for highlighting both the, let's say, the challenges for the men on the ground, the DMC things you talked about, but also the bigger picture about the world politics and Putin, Kim Jong-un relationship. Over to you, Dr. Lee, and please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mats, and I'm happy back with the ISDP webinar. Well, I fully agree with Inbom that tension is rising on the Korean Peninsula, and many bad things are happening on the peninsula right now. Well, roughly, I will talk on 4 points. One is the North Korea's evolving nuclear doctrine. And second is the recent change in North Korea's unification policy and its impact on inter-Korean relations. And third is the growing strategic collaboration among North Korea, Russia, and China. And finally, I'll talk about latest events on the which escalate the tension on the Korean Peninsula. So looking at North Korea's nuclear doctrine, I think it is evolving in a more dangerous direction. As we know, since the failure of the Hanoi summit in 2018, North Korea turned to test fire various ballistic missiles since the beginning of the 2022. We believe that North Korea now has all sorts of missiles and nuclear capabilities. Now that they have short-range, medium-range, IRBM, SLBM, ICBM, and even hypersonic missiles, whatever you name it. And what is the worst thing is that in September 22, North Korea enacted the so-called law on the use of nuclear weapons, and the law elaborated the 5 conditions for nuclear weapon use. So until now, North Korea has claimed that the U.S. hostile policy against North Korea is the root of the Korean Peninsula nuclear issue. But North Korea, because of that, North Korea claimed that its nuclear weapons are aimed at the United States, not at South Korea, which is the same nation. But now North Korea regards nuclear weapons as offensive ones and not defensive ones, and weapons that can also be used against the South Korea, which is not the same nation anymore. This last point leads to my second comments on changing North Korean unification policy. North Korea held the party's Central Committee on December 26 last year, which is an important meeting in which more than 200 key North Korean elites participate. What was most noticeable at this meeting was that North Korea presented the route for a fundamental change in the direction of its policy to the South Korea. North Korea rejected the acknowledgement of South Korea as the same nation and declared that it will adopt an ultra-hard line. After evaluating both South Korea's conservative and progressive government's North Korea policy as obstructive unification, it regarded South Korea as an enemy and stipulated that it was not a partner for reconciliation and unification. Accordingly, the possibility that North Korea's offensive against South Korea will be more frequent in the future, whether local or all-out attack. The balloon incident that Inbom mentioned is just a part of that new phenomenon. And third is the growing strategic collaboration among North Korea, Russia, and China in a deeply divided world. Inbom mentioned that Putin visited Pyongyang and Russia and North Korea agreed to establish a comprehensive strategic partnership. Most of the people interpret that as a sort of a defense treaty, meaning that Russia and North Korea will continue or deepen its military collaboration in the future. And of course, the strategic collaboration among North Korea, China, and Russia is underway already against the backdrop of systemic fragmentation or fractured global order, particularly after Ukraine war has begun. So what is the implication of it? In the future, maybe public discussion about Korean Peninsula issue will be much more difficult. And also, in a longer term perspective, deepening North Korea-Russia strategic partnership means that maybe we see in the near future the coming back of a new Cold War situation in the Northwest Asia. I think that's a pretty bad indication that perhaps the tension or security concern may be even higher in the near future. Finally, let me talk about the worsening tensions, but no escalation control mechanism. So as Inbom mentioned, just look at the latest balloon instance. North Korea is sending several hundreds balloons to the south. And in response, South Korea vowed a unbearable retaliation and suspended the CMA, Comprehensive Military Agreement, which is a fragile military deal, which is intended to ease tension with its northern neighbor. But what would happen if South Korea resumes live fire drills or anti-Pyongyang propaganda broadcast via loudspeaker in both areas? It is certain to infuriate North Korea and may prompt it to take its own provocative countermeasures along the border. So that's the overall situation on the Korean Peninsula, and that's why I said that many bad things are happening on the Korean Peninsula, and it's the time to think about both deterrence and at the same time risk management on the peninsula. So let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sang-Yong, and thank you, Inbom, for these introductory remarks. And many of the issues you highlighted are of course fairly similar because I mean you sit in the same boat. But let me start by maybe focusing a little bit about the very recent developments with Mr. Putin's visit to Pyongyang and the announcement yesterday of, we don't know the details and the contours of this so-called alliance or defense agreement, but we can assume that it is, or maybe we need to assume that it contains something along the line of military support. So what, maybe I have two reflections on the meeting and this announcement. One is what type of challenges do this mean for the kind of US ROC alliance operational planning? If maybe you can explore on this with your experience Inbom on this as a military man. And what else do we think or assume is part of the agreement from, let's say, the military things? There's been talk about scientific, agriculture, energy, but also some infrastructure project I read this morning. So what is your take on the comprehensiveness of the agreement? And do you think that these different parts of the agreements are viable, or is it just window dressing? Is it sincere, and is this something that we need to worry about and take seriously, or is it more or less of rhetoric and window dressing? So over to you, Inbom, please.
Yeah, so I think the North Koreans and the Russians will start with the easy stuff. And I won't focus about the economic portion. The Russians are already sending tourists to Wonsan, which provides hard cash to North Korea. but I won't talk about that. So probably, sending military personnel on exchange missions to study abroad in Russia and vice versa is probably something that's easy to do and will start. They will probably exchange technicians. North Korea will invite Russians to help them with their missile program, especially the long range, reentry, improving accuracy, satellites, and so forth. I think the Russians would benefit from getting conventional hardware from the North Koreans, because the North Koreans have a proven capability of manufacturing stuff, and they will work very hard. So these North Korean workers, they can produce stuff much more quickly and good products, just like the South Koreans. So I see those kinds of exchanges growing into combined exercises and some combined planning for a situation where the North and the Russians can help each other. Although many people hope that this is a temporary situation, that the Russians are doing this because of the need from the situation in the Ukraine, I believe that the Russians and the North Koreans have a common goal, which is standing up to the free world that is led by the United States. And because they have a common goal, as long as this goal exists, this friendship will exist as well. And it's a real tragedy that we're in this position. And I think it's human nature that we want to avoid knowing what is inevitable. Anybody who has ever been diagnosed with cancer, knows that the first reaction is you don't want to believe it. And so I think we're in a stage of denial here. But look, let's wake up. Let's face up to the problem and make the hard decisions. And maybe we can overcome this crisis. So I think our best solution is to make sure that people like Putin, Xi, understand that we will not be a pushover, which is something that we have not been very good at, especially in the situation in Ukraine. The Ukrainian situation started in 2014.
Yep.
And so we better make sure that, what's starting now in Korea is just a small, fist, and we must not let this grow into something bigger. So I see the new relationship, the new friendship between Pyongyang and Moscow to be enduring, that it will strengthen. And the only way for us to prepare is to prepare well and soon and make the hard decisions that must be made. Wishful thinking that Putin or Kim Jong-un, Xi will understand reason and goodwill, I think is something for the politicians to do. But for security people, we must invest and be prepared so that we do not go to war.
Okay, thank you, Inbom. And give the floor to Sang-Yung. Do you agree that this is more than a marriage of convenience that is centered on the war in Ukraine? That it's more of a little bit of strategic long-term relationship we are seeing formatting and building up now, and how comprehensive would you say it is? Sang-Yung, you are muted.
Yeah, the evaluation about Russia, North Korea, the so-called comprehensive strategic partnership, the evaluation is still quite mixed. Some people say that still it can be a marriage of convenience because North Korea does not want to rely too heavily on any single country, either be it Russia or China. But look at the term comprehensive strategic partnership. It's the quite a level up partnership that has existed between Russia and North Korea. So the key essence of this partnership is the deal to provide mutual aid if either country was attacked. So because of that, many people interpret this as a de facto alliance treaty. But traditionally, usually socialist countries do not make a alliance treaty. So if that's true, we will see how this partnership will evolve in the future. And I couldn't get the full text of the treaty, but Korean media today reported that Article 4 of the treaty said that if either party is in a state of war after receiving an armed invasion from an individual country or several countries, the other party shall provide military aid and other aid to all means it has without delay, in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter and the laws of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea, and the Russian Federation. So here, the room for interpretation remains here. What is the provide a military and other aid to all means? Will it mean automatic military involvement in the case of a war? So we have some room to interpret, and there is we needed some more evidence that to correctly understand what does it mean. But even without that commitment to fight, the new agreement allows Moscow and Pyongyang to justify weapons transaction and form a united front against what they call the US-led global order. So in a sense, it means quite a little bit different stance of the Russia and North Korea, which is quite different from what we have seen in the past. So let's look at watch it carefully how this comprehensive strategic partnership will evolve in the future.
Thank you very much, Sang-Yoon. Can I come back to you, Im-Bum, with very detailed questions? We read reports on the extent of military support that North Korea up to now has extended to Russia, and we're talking a substantial amount of, especially artillery shells and some missiles. How much more can North Korea, this poor country, provide to Russia without jeopardizing its own military readiness for a potential, contingency against South Korea? Is there a limit, or do we have any kind of insight and possibility to make this assessment?
Yeah, so, South Korea and the United States is not going to attack North Korea.
Yeah.
And the North Korean leadership knows this in their hearts of hearts. Maybe not. So I think the North Koreans can spare a considerable amount of conventional munitions. So now we think the North Koreans have sent over about 2 million rounds of conventional ammunition and maybe 100 tactical ballistic missiles, the KN-23s, the Iskandar lookalikes. So it's not hurting them, and it's not hurting their readiness. Having said that, I believe that the North Koreans have sent to Russia factories and people to run these factories, and it only makes sense. Why would you want to send millions of rounds of ammunition 10,000 miles when it's better to have a factory over there and make it over there and cut the costs and receive revenue. And if I look at all the imagery that's out there, you see all these containers, and yet these containers are not guarded. If they were explosives, you know the deal. One container full of explosives, if that explodes, the whole train station is going to be destroyed. So these containers would be heavily guarded. I don't see any guards there. So to me, that looks like machinery parts going rather than hard ammunition. So maybe they sent over ammunition. And the first stage is when the Russians were really short. But now I believe that they're actually making them over there. And so, and it really pays off for the North Koreans because they're able to try off their stuff. And I think we should really stop saying that, the North Korean products are bad and defunct and, dum-dum bells, dum-dum shells. If that were the case, why would the Russians buy it? And so I think it's a culmination of bad news. Now, all of this to me as a South Korean just prompts me to ask, if the Russians and the North Koreans are doing this, why shouldn't we send, ammunition to Ukraine? Or at least let our businesses do that on their own. And right now, a South Korean, it is illegal for he or she to travel to Ukraine, but it is not illegal for he or she to go to Russia. Why is that? Third question that I have is, if a South Korean, if he or she wants to go to Ukraine to help the wounded or even hold arms, right now it's illegal. Maybe, we should now relax that and say that if a person wants to go to Ukraine to help the wounded, help the hungry, or fight the Russians, he or she should be allowed to do that. And just to be fair, if somebody wants to fight for the Russians, fine, do that as well. But I think the individual should be allowed to do that, and it should not be legalized. So I think we're at a stage where, hey, if the Russians think that we're going to be a pushover, they need to think twice.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up. I haven't heard that before about the legal constraints in South Korea. That was interesting. Let me shift focus a little bit and return to an issue that you both brought up in your introductory statements, which is let's say, the inter-Korean relationship. Sang-Yong, you mentioned this about the changing policy from North Korea about unification, and in Boom you mentioned this about let's say the challenges in the DMZ, the fortifications in the DMZ, and also the incidents that have occurred, and the loudspeaker operations. So what is your sense of the state of inter-Korean relations, and any kind of window for diplomacy, dialogue, engagement? Is that closed now? And what is your interpretation of the change in unification policy from North Korea? Is that a prelude to establish North Korea as an independent nation without any claims on South Korean territory, or is it something else? What's your take on that? Maybe over to you, Sang-Yong.
Okay, we needed to think about why North Korea suddenly changed its policy toward South Korea. Well, in fact, since North Korea is losing its competition with the system with the South, North Korea already behaved like we are separate countries. But suddenly, of course, North Korea did not publicly announce that South Korea is not the same nation, but recently they began to publicly speak it up. So why is that? Well, there are many, of course, there are many theories, but one theory says that North Korea's intention is believed to be to prevent the possibility of unification by obsession on South Korea's turn. South Korea, which is economically dominant, and to tighten the control of North Korean society. In addition, it seems that in the new Cold War situation dominated by competition among great powers, there's nothing more to be gained by talking with the US and South Korea. And now Russia can provide enough food, fuel, and daily necessities than North Korea currently needs. So this is what's happening right now. And previously, both the South and North shared one common understanding regarding the unification formula, which is the one nation, two states, two systems. And both sides imagined a sort of a confederation of two Koreas. And also, both the South and North Korea defined the entire Korean peninsula as their proper territory in their constitution. And inter-Korean relations as a tentative special relationship before ultimate unification. So that was the previous discussion about inter-Korean relations and unification policy. But now it should be fundamentally changed. Now North Korea says that South Korea is not the same nation. So they already said that South Korea is not a partner for discussing unification or reconciliation. So I think this is quite a worrisome trend in inter-Korean relations. And of course, those Korean changes happened in the backdrop of a global security situation, which is the as I mentioned, the global fractured global order. Russia, China, and US are in deep competition, strategic rivalry. So even though North Korea, because of that, North Korea believes that they can get any assistance they need from Russia or China, and US and South Korea cannot provide any good to their society and country. And because of that, North Korea is changing its attitude. And I'm not sure how long this will go. For example, if something happens in Ukraine, imagine that one day Ukraine war is over, and Russia may not need those Korean assistance in that much in the future. Then those Korea may have some different calculations about US and South Korea. But that's, of course, that's the some hypothetical imagination. But I think we need to look at in the longer term perspective of what's happening on the Korean Peninsula right now.
Inbom, what's your take on inter-Korean relation? Is it as a stalemate at the moment, and is there a sense of why bother in South Korea?
I think this was a deliberate decision by the North Korean regime. It was not a spur of the moment decision. To me, it looks like it was a very thought out decision. I think that they did this because they're in a turning point. They realize that their society is brittle, that keeping out the truth is challenging, and they saw changes within their society that really threatened the Kim family. And so for a considerable time, maybe 2 years, especially with the outbreak of the Ukrainian war, saw that something had to be done. And so I believe that it was a deliberate decision. And this decision was that we, the North Koreans, must block influences from South Korea and the rest of the outer world. So the first step was declaring that the South Koreans are no longer the same ethnicity as North Koreans, that the South Koreans have been so corrupted that they no longer have the right to call themselves Koreans, alienating us as one people, which makes it easier for the North Koreans to kill South Koreans. Initially, when Kim Jong-un said it himself, which I thought was significant because he himself said this, I thought, wow, are they saying that they're going to give up taking South Korea by force and liberating us? Because that was the logic that they held for 7 decades. And soon they said, well, in a contingency that they would do exactly that, use force to liberate, well, not liberate, but in fact, resolve the situation. So yeah, they still are saying that they'll be using, military force to put their will against the South. So more bad news. The third issue is it seems it caught everybody by surprise, not only the South Koreans. Many North Korean supportive groups in Japan were asking, what does all this mean?
Mm.
And so it caught them by surprise. And then now the North Koreans are going ahead with, destroying monuments dedicated to peaceful resolution on the Korean Peninsula, changing names of train stations that reference unification, all those, even lyrics from songs that were a common song between the Korean people, which lasted for 100 years. And so you think, well, it's so absurd, and yet they're trying to erase South Korea from consideration. And then finally, yet even in this, as if they're saying we're going to leave you alone, Kim Jong-un is still making comments about the northwestern islands, stating that those islands are North Korea's, that the South Koreans have illegally occupied these islands. And it's contradictory to the other things that he's doing. He's actually laying claims to these islands. And these islands are so close to North Korea. It's only about 10 kilometers in the closest area. And it's already within artillery range, as we know, but they're now developing new cruise missiles tailored to anti-ships. And it'll put our ships in great peril. So all of this is very discerning. North Korea is biding their time. I've always respected Kim Jong-un for his patience and his ability to take his time. He's on his own schedule. He's making his military better. He's making these diplomatic initiatives. Must come with a lot of good luck on his side and bad luck for us that he's been able to make a breakthrough with the Russians, which puts everybody in a difficult situation, South Koreans, even the Chinese. And so I hope that in this situation, like I've been saying this again and again, we need to wake up and we need to prepare so that we don't have to go to war.
Okay, thank you. If I try to combine these two major issues we have been talking about, the increased partnership, friendship between Russia and North Korea, and the new policy on unification, how has that affected two issues that is domestically on South Korea, having two experts from Seoul on the screen? One is how has the issue on unification from a South Korean perspective been affected? Is there a sense of let's get over this and start developing and put this on let's say on history on pause, especially as I think from my time that there is a less urgency among the younger population in South Korea for unification than maybe from the older generation. So that's one. And the other element is this discussion about South Korea developing their own domestic nuclear weapons. Are these two issues, how are these two issues affected by these two, let's say, major developments, unification policy changes and the Russia-DPRK relationship? So maybe over to you, Sang-Yoon.
Well, so it's obvious that because of those Korea policy change toward South Korea, it is inevitable that we need some adjustment in previous existing unification formula. Well, still, there are a lot of a debate in Korean society. What should be the proper unification formula in the future? As I mentioned, still so far, we both North and South Korea maintain that one nation, two state and two system formula, but it should be changed. So there is some debate in Korean society that whether or not we should consider North Korea as a completely different country, or still we should believe in North Korea as a part of our nation, which will be eventually unified in some future. So right now, I heard that Ministry of National Unification is rewriting the unification policy, but I didn't hear the actual contents of that policy so far. But one thing is obvious. The aspiration to unify to Korea is increasingly weaker in Korean society in every public pulse survey. Particularly younger generation, they don't care about unification. But the problem is that if it's okay that North and South Korea should live as a separate country, but what kind of inter-Korean relationship can be? Is it if there's a hostile? I don't think that there's a good to Korea system. So somehow it is the time that we should think about if North and South Korea should live as a separate country, what is the mechanism to guarantee peaceful and stable inter-Korean relations? And you mentioned that South Korea's domestic debate about its own independent nuclear weapon. Inbom and I recently joined a big seminar in Korea National Assembly about should South Korea develop its own nuclear weapon. And obviously, public opinion says that absolute majority of Korean people support it. But if you ask a little more educated question to people, for example, if South Korea develop nuclear weapon, it should get out of the NPT and should be get some sanctions from nuclear supply group, and also by many U.S. domestic laws. It's inevitable that South Korea should suffer from international sanctions, either heavily influencing the South Korean economy. If that's the case, do you still support the South Korean nuclear weapon? Then percentage drops dramatically. So that's the reality. And I personally believe that nuclear weapon will not make a inter-Korean relation more peaceful. Think about India-Pakistan case. Even though they have a nuclear weapon, even though they do not have a big war, but still minor confrontations or tensions always persist. So a nuclear weapon is not the solution. And of course, recently, perhaps you heard about the report published by CSIS in Washington, D.C. Victor Cha published the Breaking the Bad. The title of the report is that. In this report, he surveyed the not ordinary Korean citizens, but experts and policy decision makers, elite group. Then majority, more than half of the respondents opposed the South Korea's independent nuclear weapon program. So in a sense, South Korean public emotion to North Korean threat and increasing Russia, China, and North Korean security collaboration, we have a concern. So people's reaction is quite straightforward. So that's the case, we should have a nuclear weapon. But if you look at more detailed and educated question, perhaps we have a different opinion. But what is quite worrisome in that report? Many people were asked, if Trump comes back and push again America First policy, what would be your attitude? Then more than half of the people who oppose nuclear weapon turned into supporting the nuclear program. So what I'm saying is that South Korea will consider various nuclear options in Korea. And of course, it depends on how much people feel threat from either North Korea or Russia or China. And at the same time, the debate inside North Korean society either have some evolution in the longer-term perspective. So I'm not sure how that debate will evolve in the future. But so far, I have to say that there'll be much more to lose if South Korea develops its own nuclear weapons. So it's still nuclear extended deterrence, nuclear umbrella, and with a strong alliance combined defense posture. I think that's the right way to go.
Thank you, Sang-Yu. Im-Bum, what's your take on an understanding on the discussion in South Korea about these two issues, unification and developing a domestic nuclear capability?
I think it's shameful and a disgrace that South Koreans have forgotten the value and importance of reunification at the price of human rights in North Korea. And so I believe that it is now time, especially now that the North Koreans have declared that we are not interested in a peaceful unification of the Korean Peninsula, that we educate our younger generation as to why we need to have unification, economically, culturally, politically, and for security reasons. And but I do recognize that it's not going to be easy, and it must be done peacefully. And because it must be done peacefully, the key is we must not have war. And so in order not to have war, we need to somehow figure out that the North Koreans understand that their nuclear weapons is fine, but you can't eat it. And it's getting harder and harder with the situation that we face. But I think it's important for Koreans to set the goal saying we must have unification, and that this benefits the Korean people, the security of Northeast Asia, and the world. For South Koreans having nuclear weapons, I agree with what Dr. Lee has said, but I just want to add a couple of things. Number one, Koreans like myself will never exchange the ROK-US alliance for our own nuclear weapons. We will not go behind the backs of the Americans or lie and cheat like the North Koreans did to the international community about getting nuclear weapons. But we think that the international community must listen to the fears that we have from not only North Korea, but from the big entity on the Asian continent who is a bully. And it's more than just North Korean nuclear threat that we're facing. So that's number one. Number two is, think about this: escalating to de-escalate. In order for South Korea to deal with North Korea, think about North Korea, what they have done ever since they were born 80 years ago. They've cheated, they've lied, they've tortured, they've killed, they've murdered. And I have to live next to them. How do you negotiate with somebody like that? We tried goodwill. I'm a witness to this. During the last administration, I gave all the benefit of the doubt, and yet it just vindicated my belief that you cannot buy peace. You cannot, surrender to the demands of a country like North Korea. So in order to achieve denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, the only way is to have nuclear weapons of our own. If there's any better idea, please let me know. And I believe that the North Koreans understand that we South Koreans are different from the United States and the rest of the free world. So I believe that in order to achieve a denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, the first step must be the South Korea having its own nuclear capability, which would be an extension of the free world's ability to deter North Korea as well as other players in the region. It'll be a good lesson as to see that having nuclear weapons comes with secondary and third order effects that they might not have anticipated.
Thank you very much for this. Now we have a few minutes left for our talk today, and I would like to finish off with maybe one of those $64,000 questions, as they say. Given what we have been talking about and what you have expressed, both of you, that we are in a not at all very comfortable situation. We have increased tension. We have signs of small-scale incidents happening on the ground in the DMZ. We have the big politics, power politics, etc., etc. And we have in fact, a deteriorating security situation. What kind of advice and way forward would you recommend that the South Korean government do in this, or do you have any other kind of recommendation in order to mitigate some of these risks that we have been talking about today? So maybe if I give the floor to you, Sang-Yu, do you have any recommendations or thinking on what to do in order to mitigate the risks?
Well, looking at South Korea's security policy, so far it has moved in between two extreme poles. One is the security first, and the other one is the peace first. But can we have some good combination in between security and peace? I think that we are now at the time to think of both of them. Because of the increasing North Korean threat, we need a robust and good deterrence, that's for sure. But if we look at only deterrence, who will control the escalation ladder and prevent escalation to go into bigger conflict on the Korean Peninsula? So both security and peace, I think that's really it's time to think about good combination. In order to do that, I strongly recommend the Korean and South Korean government to have some sense of balance and some attitude to accept the resilience in its security policy, and particularly policy toward North Korea and increasing threat from the surrounding countries to South Korea, like China and Russia. So I hope that using administration think a little more widely and take the more balanced and resilient attitude to the changing security environment on the Korean Peninsula.
Thank you. Any recipe in Boom from your side on what to do to mitigate the risks that we have been talking about?
Yeah, number one, stop all this tit for tat, rhetoric that's going between North and South Korea. It doesn't help lower tensions. So manage the situation, number one. Number two, there are things that need to be done within the alliance and the South Korean military. South Korean military has huge morale problems. We need to address this and fix it as soon as possible. For alliance issues, we need to expand our views that the United States is our number one ally, but we need other allies like Japan, Australia, the UK, other European countries, Switzerland, Sweden. Sweden is a country that we would need because Sweden is respected. And so I think the South Koreans should expand our views about what alliances are and what friends are about, and expand this diplomatic as well as security diplomatic efforts.
Okay, thank you both to General Chunin Bohm and Dr. Sang-Yoon Lee for enlightening us with some perspectives from your horizon on some of these very, very complex and difficult issues in relation to security on the Korean Peninsula and in the region. This was the last part of this first session of strategic talks. We will upload the talks on our web, and those of you that has been listening, please share it. And I hope to be able to comment with a publication where I try to summarize the 3 talks that we have had in the month of June. And we hope to be back in after the summer break with a new series of talks centered on other issues. So many thanks to Dr. Lee and General Chun for being our guest today. And as we say in Sweden, happy midsummer, and see you on the other side of the holiday season. Thank you very much, and thank you for today. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.